Folks, we have very grim news to report. We are now learning that as many as 150 U.S. troops have been wounded so far in Donald Trump's unlawful war against Iran. Two sources familiar with this matter exclusively are telling Reuters. Phil Stewart was the first to post on this. In addition, we are learning right now that Iran is putting mines throughout the Strait of Hormuz. Here's news via CBS this morning. U.S. intelligence assets have begun to see indications that Iran is taking steps to deploy mines in the Strait of Hormuz shipping lane. Iran is using smaller crafts that can carry 2 to 3 mines each. While Iran's mine stock isn't publicly known, estimates over the years have ranged from roughly 2,000 to 6,000 naval mines of Iranian, Chinese, and Russian-made variants. And of course, we know that the Russians are helping Iran right now to do this, we believe, as well as to target U.S. troops and to target U.S. assets as well. It should be noted that an admiral by the name of Stadridis just last week, in the past few days, wrote an op-ed in Bloomberg. And this admiral, as decorated as you can be, wrote this opinion piece that we were talking about, remember last week? Iran can turn the Persian Gulf into a minefield. And this admiral penned this op-ed for Bloomberg. He's a retired U.S. Navy admiral, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. And things are even taking even more of a turn for the worse right now. The hit versus intercept rate for ballistic missiles and drone attacks since February 28th for the UAE through today. Look at it right now. Today is not like prior days, Christopher Clary writes, and he shows this graph at the huge percentage right now of drones that are now finding their targets in the UAE and elsewhere. And we know that there have been some direct strikes as well that we've been reporting about early today. We also know that the U.S. is scrambling to move their Patriot and THAAD air defense systems from Korea to the Middle East. And these were weapon systems that were promised to Korea that are now being moved, because look what just happened moments ago. The biggest oil refinery in the United Arab Emirates halted operations after a drone strike caused a fire in the industrial area in which it's located, according to people familiar with the matter. Abu Dhabi's National Oil Co. was assessing damage at the plant, the people said, asking not to be named because the matter is not yet public. This refinery can process over 922,000 barrels of oil a day. But I want to go back to that first story that I was talking about here, that as many as 150 U.S. troops may be wounded. This is a massive, massive cover-up by the Trump regime that apparently did not want that number out there. Reuters is reporting it right now. Absolutely horrific. And I will share with you as well what Pete Hegseth said moments ago. So with all of this news, Pete Hegseth held a press conference, and he said that the media is saying that the war is expanding, the war is spreading. Here's what Hegseth just said. Here, play this clip.
It's worth underscoring. I see in the media banners that say, war expanding or war spread. It's actually the opposite. It's actually quite contained, and more of those countries are coming on side, recognizing that you can't live under a conventional umbrella with nuclear ambitions with a radical regime like that. Again, properly scoping the objectives in the process.
But then Hegseth said, like the terrorist cowards they are, the Iranians fire missiles at schools and hospitals. Isn't that what the U.S. is doing right now? Here, play this clip.
Not now, not ever, not on our watch. The mullahs are desperate and scrambling. Like the terrorist cowards they are, they fire missiles from schools and hospitals, deliberately targeting innocents, because they know their military is being systematically degraded and annihilated.
And what about the call between Donald Trump and Putin? Here's what Hegseth said moments ago. Let's play it.
President Trump said he had a really good call with President Putin yesterday. Will Russia be aiding us in this conflict? And can you share anything on that?
Well, the president, as I've said before, maintains strong relationships with world leaders, which creates opportunities and options for us in very dynamic ways. So the president said it was a good call. I was not on it, but those that were said it was a strong call, reaffirming hopefully the opportunity for some peace in Russia, Ukraine, and also a recognition that as it pertains to this conflict, they should not be involved.
But in addition to Hegseth saying that the war is not expanding, that it's actually contained, Hegseth says this will be our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. Play this clip.
For example, today will be yet again our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes. Intelligence more refined and better than ever. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, the last 24 hours have seen Iran fire the lowest number of missiles they've been capable of firing yet. Just the bifurcation, just the trend lines that we talked about on our first briefing.
So when you think about almost every past president and past defense secretaries, the weight of war is something that they describe as being the hardest decisions they have to make. Everything handled with the most meticulousness possible, and war being the last possible option. And even when presidents are forced to engage in the act of war, the feelings that they express of their hatred of the act of war and how war is this scourge with horrible ramifications, no matter what. We've heard past presidents say that, but this current administration, or regime as I call it, seems to be approaching it with a level of just immaturity. And you saw some of those clips there that I just showed you of Pete Hegseth. And for him, it doesn't seem like targeting a elementary school filled with children and little girls who were killed is a one-off. If you read this guy's stuff that he's talked about before, this is who he is. This is what he talks about. He brags about lethality and death raining down from above, language that I could never fathom coming from an American administration here in the United States. I want to bring in Senator Brian Schatz, Hawaii Senator. It's great to see you. Your insight's more important now than ever. I mean, you look at Donald Trump's press conference that he held, not just embarrassing. I know it's disqualifying times 100. And then you look at what Hegseth did this morning with this press conference and the buzzwords that he throws out and the karate chop hand gestures and the glee that he seems to have in death, like when killing people, and that it's not just, I think when we learn more about what's happening, it's more than just the elementary school, which is horrific and tragic. This is what they're doing in general, I think. What do you make of it all, Senator?
Well, I think you've got it exactly right. I've never seen a Secretary of Defense behave like this. And, when I got to the Senate about 13 years ago, I had some interactions with the Department of Defense, mostly in the Indo-PACOM AOR when I was lieutenant governor. And one of the things that struck me is you basically can't find an officer, a general or flag officer, who doesn't conduct themselves in a way that is admirable. You may disagree with their views. You may disagree with the overall Department of Defense, but it is very hard to find a person who's in one of those jobs who is not like pretty upstanding and understands the gravity of their leadership role. So I don't think this guy would get 1 star, let alone being the Secretary of Defense, just in terms of his personal conduct and the way he approaches something that is so grave. And you're exactly right. We don't know for sure, but the likely bombing of an elementary school with one of our Tomahawk missiles is not a one-off mistake. It is the result of a change in policy so that the United States has way looser rules of engagement, way more tolerance for civilian harm. This is a change that marks a stark contrast from Republicans and Democrats alike for many, many generations. The IDF has a higher threshold for civilian casualties than we do. And I think what we've decided, not we, but what SecDef has decided is that War is hell, and that's the way things go. And Trump, I think, agrees, but I think not enough attention is going to the fact that we accidentally apparently bombed an elementary school. We accidentally apparently bombed many of the likely successors to Khamenei. And now we've got this guy's son, who is even more of a hardliner and young. And so these decisions have moral implications, but they've also got strategic implications. It's not like we have precision targeting only because we are trying to do the right thing. That is part of it. But it's also because shooting the right people is in our national interest, and shooting the wrong people is antithetical to our national interest. And this guy is just not a very serious human being. It's like Secretary Noem, but in a lot of ways, it's even more consequential because we're in a war in the Middle East.
Right. And so, you take yesterday, Donald Trump makes the markets are tanking. Donald Trump makes a post. We're pretty much complete. He basically says, as we head towards a market close, all of a sudden the price of gas starts to drop. The markets, which were crashing, start to at least stabilize. Then he gives that disastrous press conference. And then as the facts start to develop, we all realize, which we should all now know in general, that nothing that he's saying and posting and telling CBS or this network or that network bears any resemblance to what's going on. And today, this morning, we know one of the biggest refineries in the UAE, has gotten hit. There doesn't seem to be any significant difference in the Strait of Hormuz other than Donald Trump saying we're going to take it over, whatever the hell that even is supposed to mean. And it actually seems that things are not getting better day by day, but quite the contrary. What are you seeing on the ground relative to what Trump is saying, which is like all over the place?
Well, I don't think anybody knows. And it's not like, normally it's a very good question to ask of a United States senator on the appropriate committees and all the rest of it. But they're not actually briefing us, partly because they don't know what the deal is. We got one solid 90-minute briefing where they actually told us the truth about what was going on. But because Donald Trump is contradicting his own Secretary of Defense, his own Secretary of State, it's very hard for them to brief us as to what's happening because I don't think they know what's happening. And I will make one additional point that's kind of narrowly about, Trump saying we're going to wrap it up soon. Both sides of a war have a vote in whether or not we wrap it up soon. I certainly hope that Donald Trump is able to declare victory, even though he secured 0 of his 3 objectives, and get out of this. But the Iranians may not be so amenable to some sort of new ceasefire or armistice or the end of the war, because in their view, they can no longer trust that we won't just come back 60 days, 90 days, 120 days later and bomb them to smithereens again. And so they view this as an existential question for them. They have a different view about what it means to compromise with the United States of America, which is to say they do not want to do it. The supreme leaders have a particular worldview, which is very hard for us to reconcile with Donald Trump's. And so even if Donald Trump wants to get out of it this week, it's not obvious that we are out of this war. And the Iranians have demonstrated an absolute willingness to attack asymmetrically. They attacked our Gulf allies. They attacked our bases and installations. I have no doubt that they are trying to ruminate on what kind of other attacks they could make that would inflict pain on not just America, but America's friends and the Western world. And they know that one of the big pain points is the Straits of Hormuz and the availability of oil. And just to be clear, we are in a global market. So it's not just a question of whether or not we can secure tankers full of oil for our own use. The problem is that when there is a global shortage, everybody takes it in the pocketbook. And so, this is backfiring spectacularly. And I think it is important to kind of draw a distinction. The military itself is executing reasonably well, with the exception of Pete Hegseth making these rules of engagement too loose. But we are really not achieving any of the goals that were stated from the get-go.
And Donald Trump is now consulting Putin. And we learned about that from the Kremlin readout of Yushakov and others there. That's how we learned about it, right? And then Trump was then asked about it because the Kremlin was bragging. Look who gave us a call, essentially. And Trump's like, yeah, I called him. You know, it went great. I thought the conversation was amazing. He wants to be really helpful in Ukraine. He wants to be really helpful with Iran. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this not the ultimate disqualifying kind of traitorous statement to make? I mean, you know, I think it's clear to the layman that Russia's helping Iran, you know, in this war right now. And obviously they're invaded Ukraine. It's like, he says these things, we move on, you know, now it's Tuesday and it's like, whoa. Dude is consulting with Putin, who's trying to kill our troops. What are we talking about here?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. And the people who are, you know, primarily aligned with this president have been the enemies of America for generations, for decades and generations. And so, you know, Putin was a big winner because he had a bunch of stranded assets in terms of oil he couldn't offload. And we eased sanctions, right? We eased sanctions on the Russians to give them cash money for oil that they couldn't sell otherwise. And that will finance the war in Ukraine and stabilize Putin's regime. And so this is already a spectacular failure. And I think I do worry a bit about Donald Trump's view now after the Venezuela operation, that he's literally asking his staff, what else you got? You know, is it Cuba? Is it Iran? What else you got? And that, I think, is very worrisome. We have an 80-year-old president who can't run for reelection, who does not feel accountable to voters, who is pissed off, who I think for his first 5 years of being president had a real hesitancy about using kinetic force and getting engaged in nation building. And I think he's crossed that Rubicon and now he's all in. My understanding is Condi Rice visited him in the White House over the weekend. I mean, the neocons are back. And that's what everybody needs to understand, is the neocons are back. If you voted against Hillary Clinton because she was too enmeshed with the neoconservatives, I understand that. I obviously don't share that view. But if you did that thinking that Donald Trump was going to prevent regime change wars, if you think that the appointment of Tulsi Gabbard or the giving of the vice presidency to J.D. Vance was an indicator that this guy wasn't going to be captured by the neoconservatives, it turns out to be wrong. Even I was not sure he was going to go full neocon, but this guy is like George W. Bush on steroids.
Like a stupid neocon. I mean, like, you know, the neocons who were detestable and deplorable in my view, like at least they spoke in sentences. I don't even know what I'm watching. Like, you know, you'll have Donald Trump praise Pakistan, and then Pakistan will praise Mount Jabba, will alienate India, will allow India to then buy the oil from Russia. I mean, I'll leave. I know you got to go, but before it's just a mess. He makes a mess of everything in some of the most obvious and dumbest ways. What do you want the people to know before you go, though, as people are reflecting on this all?
We've all got a friend, right? A high school buddy, a coworker, a family member, whatever it is, that either voted for Trump or maybe super quietly voted for Trump or was at least Trump curious, partly because of this question of war and peace. And I think what we need to do is be as welcoming as possible and not scold people for their vote and say, what the hell did you think would happen? This guy's a crook. That doesn't actually gain you people in our coalition. This is a moment when the ground is very loose in terms of electoral politics and regular politics. This is a moment when people are sort of scrambling their own views about who they're aligned with. And so it is incumbent on us to reach out to those folks who are disappointed and extend a welcoming hand and try to build this coalition. One of the things that was most powerful about Donald Trump's coalition is it made no damn sense. It had no ideological consistency. And guess what? If you're going to get to a 51% of the public coalition, there's going to be internal contradictions. So my advice to everybody is to reach out to that friend who is anti-war and just check in with them and try to move them a little bit further in our direction and to understand that the Democratic Party, warts and all, right? Gaza and all, neoconservative penetration and all, is still the party that has a rational foreign policy. It doesn't mean we always get it right, but we do not go into countries in the Middle East and bomb them to smithereens and then try to figure out what happens next.
Senator Schatz, thanks for joining us as always.
Thank you.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.